In today's video, I want to cover something that's pretty interesting that was recently posted on the Division subreddit. And it's the skills, talent, and perks that you can fully see prior to the game's actual launch. But be forewarned, some of the information is placeholder and some of the numbers may not be finalized. Now, this comes from a Division user, subreddit user by the name of Mildek. I'll have the information in the description below so that you can do your own fine-tuning and testing and reading through if you so choose. But today I want to cover certain items that I think are not necessarily questionable, but very interesting. I don't want to start throwing around the word nerf or this or not because I haven't been able to try it. And while certain things may look deceptive on paper, they may not fully turn out like that in the actual release. So let's go through them, and then you can decide for yourself if you think that these items are quote-unquote nerfable, etc. It's hard to say before a game actually launches, and I want to get out of the mindset of being like, well, that's overpowered before I even try something. Because unfortunately, that is the mindset that I've been in recently, and I don't want to do that to a game that may or may not deserve it, right? So it's an unfair statement to say. But let's start with it. I'll go through a couple of these. I'm not going to go through all of them because I don't think that me reading them to you is going to give you any more interesting information. It's more or less I'm just going to read the ones that I think are interesting that you may want to take note of. The first one here is pharmacy in the medical. This is in the talents section. And it says revived a down agent to reduce incoming damage by 50% for 10 seconds for both players. So in an instance where, say, your homie goes down, you want to go obviously revive him. There's an incentive there to be that if you can pull off that revive without dying, you get a 50% damage reduction for 10 seconds. You both do. Now that's awesome in a lot of situations, but it's also somewhat, some could say, maybe a little bit too much damage reduction in instance for player versus player. But like I said, I'm only thinking about certain situations in my mind, and it's something that may or may not occur like that. 10 seconds is a great period of time, and 50% damage reduction is also a great number. But at the same time, it may never turn out that way in a PvP match, or may not be that useful, right? Who knows? The second one is using a medkit during low health to increase damage resistance by 40% for 10 seconds. So there's a reoccurring theme with some of the medical sign, which is damage resistance buffs, which are good and interesting. But again, medkits are only used when you're in low health. So to incentivize the use there, you're going to get a 40% damage reduction for 10 seconds after you use the medkit. Now, what I'm going to assume here, and I think this is pretty much the case, is that these talents, once they go active, have a cooldown. So you're not going to be able to like, well, there's a medkit, and in the next 10 seconds, I'll just activate another one and get another 40% damage reduction, and then in the next 10 seconds, I'll get another one. I assume that it's going to be on like a 3 to 5 minute timer, like any other MMO does with talents and trinkets, etc., where they don't make it so that you can abuse the mechanic, but more or less use them in very situational sets, or they're only used once per combat. The idea here, I could see that the revive mechanic and the damage resistant mechanic through using medkits can get very annoying in PvP for a lot of people, but that's just my opinion. The other one here is on the tech wing, and it basically says complete a cover-to-cover move to increase weapon damage by 2% per meter covered for 10 seconds. And so if you guys haven't used the cover-to-cover mechanic, essentially what it was is that if you were in cover, you could move to another piece of cover through the centered animation if you were within range of reaching that cover. And the range was actually pretty decent. I think it extended to like maybe 20, 25 meters, maybe 30 meters at most, but you were in that animation for that period of time. You could leave the animation at any time by canceling it, etc. I think you had to hold the designated button down. On the Xbox, I think it was A. PC, it was space if you didn't remap your keys, and you had to hold it down to complete the move. And it was very useful to a certain extent because it allowed you to move to positions, and you could do some interesting things with it. Like you could start a reload and then go into a cover-to-cover move, and you would be reloading as you were doing the cover-to-cover move. And I found that very useful. Didn't always work. I think there were some nuances with it, but I think that right there, coupled with a damage bonus of 2% times however many meters you move, is very interesting. The second piece here is, let me see if I can find it. I was looking through quite a few of these Obviously, this one is pretty good. There's another cover-to-cover move where, yeah, here it is. During cover-to-cover move, incoming damage is reduced by 30%. So there's a reoccurring theme in some of these where you get damage reductions or buffs accordingly for doing certain actions, which is fine. It sort of fits a particular playstyle. So if you are the person that likes to move cover-to-cover, then it would be beneficial to either pick up this one or the top one to get either a damage reduction or a damage weapon buff, depending on how you like to play. For me personally, I don't know. What I assume is going to happen is that you're only going to be able to pick one talent per wing here. So you only have one medical, one tech, one security. You won't be able to pick like, 4 or 5. I think that would be maybe semi-broken. But the idea here is that you have an ability to fine-tune your character based on certain actions that you find yourself consistently doing. So, for example, if you're a medic for your team and you find yourself consistently having friends that are going down or something like that, you run the damage resistance buff, or maybe you do a little bit more in the med kits, stuff like that. I'll leave the rest of these for you to check out. I just wanted to cover really those 4 to give you an idea of some of the potential ones. I think the 4 that I covered are more powerful than some of the others. And like I said, this could be solely placeholder data mine text. I'm not 100% sure, but I do think it's very interesting that this information is already out because I haven't seen the talents or perks yet, at least in a full listing during the betas and the alpha that I played. Let me know what you guys think. Is this interesting to you? Do you think that some of them can be a little dicey? Do you think that they're balanced? I'm very curious to know. Let me know. You guys are beautiful people, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
I took a stand for me until I got lost. And I have been a stranger, back and forth, and run so far, and slowly